Chapter 9. 2 days later the privateers dropped anchor in the Bay of San Juan, entering with all flags triumphantly flying, their cannon banging out salutes to the silent Spanish flag above San Cristobal. Malachi paced the poop deck, still in his good black coat and his cockaded hat. It had not been until the night before, when he had invited his officers to dine with him in celebration of their victory, that he had discovered he was supposed to have been wounded. His crew had looked at him with some surprise the night of the battle, when he had come on deck after supper to supervise the repair work. He was himself surprised to find them cheering him as soon as he mounted the poop deck. The solicitude of his officers and servant had been extravagant. He had been offered a hammock chair, assistance up and down the poop ladder, and was urged to go below and not worry, all would be ready by dawn. Puzzled, but weak with his phlebotomy, Malachi had obeyed and returned to a new cabin. His gear and furniture had been returned, the partitions reassembled, and the clutter cleaned up during the brief time he'd been on deck. The broken stern windows, though not repaired, had been roughly curtained with canvas. The next morning he'd been on deck to get the ship under way, and again the crew had cheered him. He'd grinned and waved his hat, and commenced the grim business of getting Cossack under way from amid a sea of gray corpses. The dead of yesterday's battle had been buried by the Reverend Gill, wrapped in canvas with a round shot to send them to the bottom. But sharks had been active in the shallow waters, and several canvas coffins had been torn open, their mutilated contents floating to the surface. The other officers had continued to rain attention on him, and after he'd been invited to sit down once too often, he damned their solicitude and demanded to know what was wrong with him. "Nothing, Captain," they'd replied warily, and Malachi brusquely told them not to treat him as an invalid. They kept their distance after that. It wasn't until that evening, with the officers and Castro dining in Malachi's cabin, and Shaw out of breath from running from one end of the table to the other, pouring wine and serving the meal, that Maddox had been free-tongued enough to ask him where he'd been hurt. "In the purse, gentlemen," Malachi said. "That Belinda was worth money."